Well, hello there.
How's it?
Good, how are you?
Doing great.
Awesome.
So, what did you have in mind today for today's discussion?
So I just wanted to have a chat back and forth. Today in Canada is our Bell Mental Health Day. And as a practitioner that's been working in this field for the last 25 years, I think that there's so many different angles that we could be taking about talking about mental health. Um, when I think about the modality itself, and I think about like going to a doctor, and when you go to a doctor, you get this sliding scale, right? They're like, okay, this is the healthy weight, this is overweight, this is underweight. And
Hmm.
so they give you a lot of different options as to what you can do to be able to really get your weight back in order and get into the healthy aspect of weight. Okay. And yet, when we go to see somebody about our mental health, we're not given no sliding scale. We're not given no options. I mean, they do say, you should eat better, you should get some exercise. It would be really good for you to be outside during the day. I mean, if you could get out of bed and brush your teeth and go for a shower, that's a win, which to some people in some circumstances or situations it is. But there is an aspect of those basic things that aren't reaching us at the depth that we really could get to if we were looking at mental health and talking about mental health from a different aspect, because our society is fully stuck on the mental illness aspect of health. And now the sliding scale has went so far to that end that look at the epidemic that we're living in right now in our world globally, right? So I feel like there's just a lot of different aspects of conversation that we could be bringing up and just kind of throwing around some different ideas and just different stuff that is not being spoken about as we focus on illness instead of wellness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, a lot could be said about that. Um, one thing I know offhand about the psychiatric industry is that they produce a lot of pathologies or like a pathological diagnosis where they say you have this disorder, you have that disorder. They have all these sort of designations, but there's no blood test, there's no brain scan. It's actually not based in anything scientific, anything measurable. It's sort of an arbitrary judgment by a quote unquote psychologist. And then the next phase is they put you on these drugs with all kinds of side effects that are bad for your health in general, often just harmful to your internal organs and create a
100%.
dependency. And the drugs that they're prescribing for people, they put people in a certain sort of state of mind, whatever that is, or they sort of alleviate certain symptoms, but they do not treat the illness whatsoever. And actually, the person who's giving this prescription, that person does not uh, actually have any roadmap or any plan to get well in any sense. It's just continue to take these drugs. And that's the plan, is you're going to be basically hooked on drugs now. And if you don't have the drugs, you feel desperate, or you might feel dependent or panicked because you don't have these things that you know, turned into a dependency. And they're not even claiming that they're healing your brain. They're not
Yes.
saying, here, take this nutritional thing and it's good for your brain health. They don't claim that. They just say,
It's
here, take this. It'll be,
managing, yeah,
yeah,
managing symptoms, yeah.
yeah. So, I know that's a lot of what's going on with the psychiatric industry. And then
It's
there's
a
just the state of society and just the overall sort of anxiousness and anxiety and incoherence and suicidal kind of quality and tendency that our society induces.
Yeah.
I call it the state of meaninglessness, which is
Mhm.
we have not shown our children that life is sacred. We have not shown our children what it is to love, to respect, to value your life, to value life in general. And we're telling our kids maybe superficially, oh, do this and do that. That's the right thing. But they can overhear our conversations in the next room and they know, well, these aren't happy people. These aren't
Right.
good people. They're telling me by some vague outline to be good, but they're not good people. They talk badly about each other. They don't have a positive attitude towards the world. But they tell me I should have a positive attitude towards the world. We put so many negative examples, especially here in the United States. I don't know how much different it is from the Canadian perspective, but here in the United States, we just celebrate these grotesque figures, these just negative individuals, certain people in our popular culture. I don't even want to say their names and promote them further, but just
Fair
certain
enough.
people they've been given all these awards. They don't deserve an award for anything that they're doing. A lot of these, rappers in particular come to mind who, being here in New York, in Harlem, a lot of the community is influenced by this hip hop music, especially young kids are being influenced by this stuff. And a lot of these people, they came from rough communities, and you can just go back to those communities and realize they haven't donated one penny to the well-being of the communities that they came out of. They've become, multi-millionaires in some cases, but they didn't turn around and give back to the community or anything like that. They just aggrandized themselves, promoted themselves, engaged in just ego-based performances. And for whatever reason, people just they celebrated that. Oh, look at this guy. He's an egomaniac. Yay. We love that. We celebrate that. And then the
Right.
sad part is then it plays out in terms of social behavior because it creates an example where, okay, this guy gets to act like an ignoramus and he's a millionaire for it, waving guns around and throwing wads of money around and acting like this careless, reckless person. And for everybody else, you'll just pretty much wind up in prison behaving like that. But so
Right.
you create this example that say, oh, look at that. That's success. And it's behaviors that in the real world will land you in prison, basically.
Right.
So
Absolutely. The contradictions and hypocrisy. I think that you hit the nail on the head right there. Like, if you think about this from the time that we're little, right? Especially when we're little, our senses are active. We might not understand what's actually going on in our environments. We can feel tension. We can feel anger. We can feel sadness. That's all we've really got as a kid is our senses. And so, over time, like I think about how many times a kid will come up to a parent and like, is looking at them in a way of like, what's wrong or saying to them what's wrong. And the parent is saying nothing. Now, understandably so, this is complex, right? Like a kid is not of the mind or of the maturity to be able to truly have that conversation about what's going on, But to say
yeah.
to a kid nothing, it no longer validates the feeling that the kid is having to begin with. So being able to say to a kid, like mommy's sad or daddy's sad or whatever that is, but it's all going to be okay is 10 times better for us to say in an honest energy with the kid. And if you think about it, like our parents were not saying things to us because they were trying to hide things. They were just trying to be mature enough to not drag a kid into it. And yet
Hmm.
the feeling of kind of constantly being dismissed for what those feelings are is a part of what really drives us to feel like there's something wrong with us to begin with. All of a sudden I'm having all these feelings. I'm trying to figure out my environment as a little. My brain's not actually fully functioning in a way that I can understand it. And now my environment is constantly in contradiction or in discorded energy, right? And so, as we are feeling that in our environment as a little child, often our subconscious is interpreting as though the energy is because of us. It's that little part inside of us that's a narcissist, right? Like our subconscious doesn't give a crap about anybody else. It's like, I'm here for my journey. What does this
Hmm.
mean about me, for me, with me, to me, through me, whatever? Like, what does this mean for me? And so, as much as, all these things that we do by default, just by not paying attention to some of the things, like, is what actually creates this concept of us feeling like there's something wrong with us instead of right with us, you know? If you go into programming even, this is like a complex thing too, right? We are all programmed as a kid. And so our environments dictate a lot of things. Are we allowed to speak our truths? Are we in positions where our environments are unsafe, or are they safe for us? There's so many determining factors that set the tone for us as to whether or not we're in a healthy state of thought process and feeling and energy, or if we're actually in a place of like, this life sucks, it's unsafe, get me out of here, like that's kind of the range that we have to work with. And instead of looking at all the complexities that make a human, unfortunately what's happened is that the industry of psychiatry has taken the brain, has said that they're experts on it, have siloed it from every other system. So like if I've got something going on with my heart and I'm unaware of that, the chemistry that is taking place in my body to try to protect my heart and help my heart may have an impact on other different functions and systems in the body. But because
Hmm.
psychiatry is so siloed, it just looks at it and says, oh, you think this way, you feel this way, this is what's wrong with you. Here's some meds. You have a chemical imbalance. You're going to have to take these meds for the rest of your life, but don't worry, you'll be able to manage. You know? And the piece being is that it's leading people down well, look at our society. It has led people down the road of mental illness, and it has created this epidemic where now our humanity is just hurting. Our humanity now, everyone's just like hopped up on drugs. They can't even feel their own emotions. And guess what? We can only heal if we go through them. So there's that. But the other side is that now all of a sudden you have all these people hopped up on these meds that keep the emotion stuck so that it doesn't come up to be expressed. And now all of a sudden you have people that are only functioning with one half, like one third of a system that needs to work together in order for us to get to the aspect of wellness and health. So it's there's a lot of things, a lot of missing pieces, let's say, to the puzzle that we got to really start looking at, because the reality is, as a humanitarian, I want my people to know how to get better. I don't, my whole entire heart wants us to get back to roots of, herbs, and to meditation, and to understanding the different functions in this body and how to work with them. We're like the best technology out there, and yet we're dumbing it down and numbing it out and walking around like zombies that are miserable because we just don't know how to deal with our emotional shit, like, and there's ways to do that. There's tons of ways to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a society that doesn't really, frankly, care about the individual. I mean, our modern society is just crushing people. It's crushing people spiritually, economically. We have these little slogans, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and all this kind of stuff. And it's just not possible in a lot of cases. Sometimes the injury is that severe or the situation is such that it's just not feasible for a person to just put a little pep in their step and just fix things. And you have a society that will allow people to be crushed and allow people to be sort of disgraced. I see a lot of people now that I'm a family man myself with a wife and two kids. I also see people who are just a little bit older than I am, who may be in their 60s or even now in their 70s or approaching their 70s, and they don't have security. They've worked their whole lives. They've contributed to society. They've proven over and over again that they're good people, and they
Right.
don't have this comfort. They don't have a feeling of content that they have a place to stay. They know that they're okay. They're being threatened with eviction. In New York City, I don't know how it is, for example, in Ontario, but you have situations where you have people who have worked solid professional jobs for their entire lives and now find themselves in a situation with multiple roommates.
Yeah.
that they're renting what you call an SRO, single room occupancy,
Yeah.
and they're being faced with things like a landlord who just arbitrarily says, "Oh, your rent is being increased by $500 a month."
Right.
And it's like I
Right.
don't have an additional $500. I don't know where to go now. And you have these people, there's just this kind of drumbeat behind us, just kind of saying, "You're worthless. You're worthless. We will crush you. We don't really care about you." And like it struck me when my father died in an accident, and I became suddenly the what's the term for it? The executor to his estate, and I'm suddenly managing money and some very moderate inheritance, but various bank accounts and different things. I need to go to various banks and say my father died. I have to close down his account, etc. And
Right.
it just I learned a lot about society through that process because I realized, wow, when your parent dies, you're launched into immediately into this technical process. You don't even get a day off, let
Right.
alone like a proper like week of mourning. The society
Right.
doesn't say, "Oh, your father died. Just go meditate, think about life, come back in 1 week. We'll pay you your salary. We'll take care of everything you need for that period." You get one
Right.
father, one mother in life, and you don't get a chance to even process. It's like, okay, sorry, your father died. Now you need to go to the bank. You need to contact the county clerk's office and do this, that, and the other thing. And it's just immediately into this bureaucratic affair, which is the opposite of spiritual in a sense. It's the opposite of reflecting. It's turning everything into this technical, mechanical worldview. And
Well, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's true, unfortunately. And I think that this is the piece around why I feel like it's so important that we really start talking about mental health in a different way. If we look at the system and the design
you know
and
what it
what,
reminds me of? I wanted to say one thing, which is an
sorry, yeah, go
example of what
ahead.
I just want to say one thing quickly because it flashed me back to the image of when I was the executor to my father's estate. It's like I had to bring in all these examples of identification, which rightfully so. You don't want people committing fraud just in a frivolous manner. But I'm show up. I already had an appointment. I'd already been there, and then I waited, and I was sort of in a time crunch. I had to go to work. I had to teach after school chess, and I was there at the time of my appointment, and it took a little longer in the bank than I expected. And they said, "Actually, sir, we need you to produce one more document of evidence." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great." Luckily, I had an account personally in the bank that was directly across the street. And I
Okay.
ran across the street to get a generic statement that I have an account at this other commercial bank. And I brought that one document back. And I'm like, okay, wow, I brought like, a passport, various forms of ID, all these various documents, all these various things, and they needed one more thing. And the implication is like, you know, we don't trust that you're a legitimate person. You need to prove that you're legitimate through
Right.
repeated forms of evidence. But we as a bank, we just simply exist as an inexorable just power structure. It's not a fair thing where they have to present evidence to me. Well, the evidence is I'm walking into a commercial bank. So a
Right.
bank is legitimate. Me, I'm assumed to be not legitimate. I'm assumed to be basically like potentially a criminal actor until I can produce authentication that shows I'm not a criminal or a fraudulent person.
Trust me, I can appreciate that. First and foremost, I'm sorry that you went through that because it's a lot to go through to begin with, but I definitely agree with you. Unfortunately, the way that the structure of the system is set is that we're the monsters. And, for a really long time through, I'm talking decades, I'm talking centuries, the conditioning and the shaping was easier to do with some of the people that were coming into the generations. Their vibes were a little bit low density. They could, be programmed and brainwashed really easy and just trust things really easy. And over the generations, as we're coming in with a higher frequency. So now we're coming in, we're seeing things being like, I don't know. I'm not so sure. You're saying that. It goes back to the parent example that you gave, right? You're saying that, but then you're saying this too. There's a duality here. There's hypocrisy in here. And unfortunately, one of the things that's happening is that our kids, especially, are slipping through the cracks because they are so sensitive in their own and they see things. And so when we're treating them like they're just, yeah, I'll use the word monster because that, as much as we all want to say that we don't treat our kids like monsters, how many people sit down and listen to a kid? Like get actually schooled by a kid. They are so cool. And this is the unfortunate part. Because we have not been listening to kids for so long, at this juncture in society, listening to kids now means that they want to be the opposite sex. We had this whole gap of not talking with kids at a level of respecting their feelings and teaching them how to move through them and reminding them how to still, really feel good about themselves in the process. And because we had this humongous gap of time where we weren't actually doing that, and I'll give the example of when cell phones became popular for our generation, a lot of kids missed out on their parents' presence, on their parents' time, and on their parents' attention. And now all of a sudden everyone's here. Yeah, yeah, go, play your game, do that, do this. And I witnessed it firsthand with friends that had children where I was like, my heart was breaking, thinking, oh my God, like, not only are we listening to this rap music that is like about killing people, but this kid is like sitting here like not knowing what to do with themselves. Like, we got to switch this scene, but we don't think about the kids in this scene. We think about ourselves as adults and they'll mix and mold into it. And unfortunately, the way that the system structure has been is that they've taken advantage of that. They're like, oh, your parents don't listen to you at home, no problem, we'll listen to you. Oh, what's that? You want to dress as a little girl? No problem, we'll advocate for you to dress as a little girl. Now going back to mom and dad or whoever the guardian is, and now saying, well, you're not paying attention to your kid, so we are, and your kid wants this, and because they want this, we're going to help them. It is atrocious. Okay, like,
Yeah.
first and foremost, for psychiatry to be built on subjective testing and not having medical tests in any means, shape, or form, there is practitioners, there's workers in the field that I've worked with for 25 years that will argue with me until they're blue in the friggin' face because they believe that there is actual medical testing because psychiatry, or they've come across some sort of a paper. And like, don't get me wrong, we're starting to move into a space where there's more doctors that just don't buy into the psychiatric model. And now they are taking it to the next level of, neuroscientists looking at, so what is going in the brain at the time that you're thinking or feeling this, right? But we live, let's just take it here for a second. Look at what happened over the last 5 years on this planet. Okay. And you look at the way that people became aware of, oh my God, a doctor's just a doctor. They don't actually know what they're doing. They don't, like, we've been trained to see them as experts, and we've been trained to trust them, and we've been trained to believe that they are the people that know all things medical about this body, you know? And so when we look at the psychiatric area, we've been doing the exact same thing. Oh, you're the brain doctor. You must know everything about the way that my technology functions, and you are going to help me the best that you can to figure out my own brain, what's going on. And that's not actually happening. We're looking at symptomology. We are looking at the different aspects around, like, okay, well, if you're experiencing this and this and this, then you're in this category, and that's where you stay. And firsthand experience in my life has been witnessing going into different scenarios where I'm walking into a psychiatrist office with a client and sitting down, and the psychiatrist being like, okay, so the last time that you were here, We identified that you're ADHD, and I gave you medication, X, Y, and Z, however many milligrams. How's it been going? And the client gets like all emotional and like it feels like there's something even more wrong with her since she started taking the medication. It's not doing well with her own body and she's feeling all these things, and then the doctor literally within less than 5 minutes turns around and is like, "Oh, you know what? That's because I got your label wrong. You're actually bipolar. I'm going to switch you over to this med." The next meeting that we went in with them, I literally was like, "So let me guess, she's schizophrenic this week? Like we're changing her med
Mhm.
again?" Like because
Right.
it's like a throwing of the I just want to bring in a really important point about this because one thing, there's a doctor named Dr. Amen. His name is Dr. Daniel Amen. And
Mm.
a couple years ago, he ended up doing a really, really great uh, podcast or interview with someone, and he was talking about how 87% of people that are addressing their mental health go to a regular physician. And he was talking about the harm that can be done to someone going to a regular physician because a regular physician doesn't know what the actual medications do. They've been paid by, excuse me, they've been paid by big pharma. They have a script that big pharma gave them to read to say like, "Hey, this is what this medication is going to do. This is how it's going to benefit you. You know, you might get dizzy in your side effect, you might feel a little nauseous, but you're good." And if people are on medications that are not working for their brain, just like street drugs, a person can go absolutely batshit crazy. A person can start taking a medication and within a week start cheating on their partner, start gambling all their life savings away, start like erratic behavior, like, and we witness this all the time in the world. And instead of having any account, like doctors or psychiatrists having any accountability, we're turning around looking at the individuals experiencing it saying, "Oh, you're just getting really sick. You're mentally ill." You know, like, and it's not always the case. Like there's some extreme mental illness. I myself look at that as a spiritual crisis, but that's a totally different conversation. Unfortunately though, we're taking the human experience, we're ripping it apart. Every aspect of being a human is now has a label and a medication to go with it, and the majority of the world doesn't understand the structure and the way that this business has been built, how the model of this business has been built.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I we've gotten into a dangerous situation here in modern society, I would say, in terms of putting the value of industry above the value of the human being,
A
basically. I mean,
hundred
we've gone
percent.
really far past that threshold. And I think it's really unfortunate that we've decided that nothing is off limits in profit making. You know, if you could go and kill 1,000,000 people and it's a profitable business, we just say, oh, well, it's a clever business idea. You know, if you want to make an omelet, you have to break a couple of eggs kind of attitude.
Right.
And, I think that's really unfortunate. I think it's really sad that we're in a situation where we're being treated, our health is often being treated by people who just simply wouldn't help us heal if they couldn't profit off of it. If it was just a matter of you being well, they wouldn't help you. They're helping you because they're making money through the process of quote unquote treating you. And I have nothing against people earning money and people engaged in the marketplace. I don't have anything against that inherently, but I would prefer a world where some things are actually off limits, where the sanctity of human life is sort of placed a little bit separately. And we just say, okay, well, we don't do that for money. We don't exploit pregnant women for money. We don't exploit, the elderly. We don't exploit, illnesses in this manner. We're prioritized towards actually treating people and increasing quality of life, and somehow the economics could sustain that. But it's
Right.
this ruthlessness that we find in the psychiatric industry, in big pharma, which we call at this point big harma. My co-host and friend Dr. Ben
Yes.
Marble talks about when you go to the hospital, you're going to the hell hospital.
Right.
And yeah, we've gotten to that point where, and there's a lot of there's a lack of a total lack of informed consent going on. I don't
Right.
want to get into
110%. No,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
totally different topic. Yeah.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
want to get into a bunch of examples to highlight that, but several examples do come to mind in terms of people who are being told to take certain medical procedures and whatnot, and there's really significant harm associated with this, and they're just being told, "Oh, just go and do that. Just go and have that procedure done." It's like I just read about it myself. It says like 5% of people are left with lasting injuries. You didn't quite mention that, doc, when you
Right.
scheduled my appointment to
Yeah.
get this invasive procedure. And then
Well,
there's
and
also this weird thing.
yeah,
I was
go
going to say,
ahead.
you'll see this weird thing on these commercials. It used to be the class action lawsuit growing up. You'd see these commercials on television saying, if you took this product or if you were around during this event, you might be entitled to compensation. And there were class action lawsuits happening. It seems to me, I don't know the whole legal history, but it seems to me that something shifted in the industry where they said, okay, we're going to tell you all the side effects up front and we'll therefore not have the liability that I guess was just
Mm,
damaging major corporations, because now you see these commercials where they have people running through, the patch of sunflowers and, the rainbows in the sky as they're telling you 10 million side effects of your psychiatric drug. And they'll even
yeah.
say ridiculous things like side effects include homicidal ideation,
Right.
suicidal ideation. If you
Seriously.
experience these symptoms, contact your mental health professional. It's like, but what if I commit homicide or suicide before I contact my mental health professional? And it's like the the implication of all of those side effects, as they call them. First of all, I don't consider them side effects, and it's actually a misnomer to say side effects. Those are the effects of the
Yeah,
drugs they are giving
exactly.
people. It's not a
Yeah,
side effect, it's the effect when it's happening, and it's the reaction to the drug. It's a
right.
misnomer at that point to say side effects. So we're getting used to this idea of all these problems happening like we're a sinking ship, it seems. It's like, oh, you have this drug to cover up the symptomology of the previous drug you take, and eventually we're like on this cocktail of drugs, and eventually we just die of acute organ failure, maybe before the age of 70 or something, if we take all of their advice. And it's just a degraded concept of the human being. I'd like
Yeah.
to value myself more than that. And I wish that others would also value themselves more than to think, well, I need to be subjected to all of this harm.
But I think that that's where there's such a misperception about the human psyche, to be honest, because I believe that there is a lot of people that want to be able to feel better and do different things. We have to remember how like ingrained the belief system is about going to a certain doctor to get the certain education and believing that they know it all, you know? It's mind blowing to me. Like when I got into mental health and was being shown and taught, educated these labels, everything in my whole entire spirit rejected it. I was like, absolutely not. That is not how a human being functions. There's way more than we need to look at than that. I'm not willing to just say that they're ill and that they're in a box of this and that they need to be on meds. Because as you already highlighted, the reality is it is the effect of the medication and it creates tons and tons of different elements of illness to begin with. Like you said, organ failures, different things going on in the body to begin with. There's so many different levels of effects that we do not talk about because it's okay not to be okay. I'm allowed to be on my drugs. Like, yeah, you are allowed to be on your drugs, but you're still miserable after 20 years of taking them. Like, come on, let's try something new, you know? Like, let's actually remind you how to retrain your brain. Let's remind you how to emotionally regulate and heal from all the stuff that is hurt. Let's remind you how to actually start working with your human technology and learning how to activate different parts of you that do end up creating an increase in wellness. There's so many different aspects, but in the focus being narrowed in on just how crazy everything is. Like, I'll give a little example here. I had a client that came into my office a couple months ago, and she was struggling with her mental health. And she said to me, at one point in time, like, society was just in a place that you didn't have to take meds to function. And I kind of looked at her because I had a moment of like, oh my God, that's how people feel. There it is. Like, in order for me to function, I better pop this. And trust me, okay, I've considered that more than once along my journey, being like, how do I get my focus and organization? I should go on Adderall. I know that I'd be abusing the drug. That's why I don't do it. Like, it's not going to be a good outcome for me. So I have to learn how to train myself really hard sometimes to get myself focused and actually follow through with doing one task to the other. But that's because we all live in this world of instantaneous gratification. And for example, if I can, you know, if I can listen to you talk about something and choose to swipe within seconds, I could just swipe to the next thing. What I'm actually doing internally is I'm like, if anything brings up my emotion, I'm going to the next one, right? Well, we've taken that concept of medication. Well, just try this one. If it doesn't work, just go to the next one. If it doesn't work, just go to the next one. We all know a drug dealer in the world that's like, hey, just try this next one. It's going to be this one, like, and there's unfortunately under the guise of medical model, and this is the Cartesian model of medicine that we work with here in the West, is that the Cartesian model of medicine works with symptomology. It's not trying to get down to the root of what is actually taking place. It's working with the symptom in its own and saying, okay, so, we're going to try and work out that symptom and see what happens. So there's a humongous gap between what people actually need in the level of consciousness that we are as beings and as souls in this world, witnessing all this stuff, and the difference between in Eastern medicine they call it the dynamic model. And when you're working with the dynamic model, you're no longer looking at someone as a symptom. You're looking at them as a whole being, as a mind, as a body, as a soul, as a spirit. You're looking at a whole overall health of a full well-being. As we're in the Western world, we just look at the brain and go, oh, yours is defective. Here's some meds on your way. And I just want to be really clear here, because as much as I myself don't feel that medication is the best way, the best route to go. I've definitely come across people that have allowed, or just by circumstances, one thing happening after another, where they were not functioning and required a medication to kickstart them, to get them back up into their own space. I'm not trying to say as a blanket statement that medication doesn't work. Like anything, for some it will, for some it won't. But I think that the biggest piece here is that we have millions of people that are slipping through the cracks, that are experiencing some form of mental something. They're on their sliding scale, they're moving up and down. And when they get to this point, they don't want to take meds. They don't want to really, like, just block all their emotions. They don't want to numb themselves out, but they don't know what other treatments and options are actually available to learn how to rewire their own brains, to be able to work with and for their own system, to activate it in a different way so that it can function at optimal health and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to mind when you say there's like a gap, to me, it's like the gap is the moment of self actualization, self awareness, first of all, sort of challenging the concept of Rene Descartes, the Cartesian model. I think, therefore I am, is missing the sort of the moment of actualization, which is more I am, therefore I am,
Right.
therefore I think.
Right.
But it's just from here to there. I think, therefore I am. Psychology is a unique discipline in all of the universe, actually. It's the only thing, it's an incredible thing, actually, to think and realize that in psychology, we have the only thing in the universe that I could think of where we have the object of study studying itself.
Hmm.
The human brain
Right.
is aware of itself and is trying to figure itself out. I mean, I don't think that like a red giant star is going through the same process. Maybe it is. Maybe our own sun, which is an orange dwarf, is engaged in some reflective process, and we are totally clueless about, the psychology of the cosmos or whatever. But as far as we know, the human brain is the most intricate technology, if you will, in all of the universe, and it's the only object that is involved in this never-ending inquiry into itself. I think that a big part of psychological health is just, I mean, I hate to use a cliche term, but coming to grips with various things, coming to grips with your pain, coming to grips with your anxiety, coming to grips with just the various feelings that you feel. If you feel great, well, then you're going to come down from that at some point, and you might come too
Right.
far down. And now we say, oh, you're slightly depressed. You don't feel as well as you felt yesterday. But to sort of understand in advance that there's going to be this ebb and flow in life, and to allow yourself to feel certain things, and in a lot of cases to realize, well, hopefully in every case, to realize that these feelings are really a natural reaction to your life circumstances. um,
Right.
Again, that we have a tendency to pathologize things and pretend or describe that something is a disorder, and it's not a disorder. It was just called life, actually. It was called,
Yeah.
well,
A
you're
100%.
reasonably sad about this. You were reasonably embarrassed, or whatever emotion you want to pick out of this huge range of emotions we're going to experience in our lifetimes. My father was a psychoanalyst, and that's what's always made me interested in this topic. And I used to talk with him about just the human condition and psychology and all that kind of stuff. And a big theme in my father's psychological framework, which I think he was very advanced about, I think, I haven't come across other psychological texts that emphasized the same way my father did the theme of humiliation, and
Mm.
the idea that just we're governed, unfortunately, by a sense of humiliation, and most of us, based on our life experiences especially, become very prone to humiliation, almost to the extent that we're almost, in a lot of cases, in like a PTSD type of state of sort of
Right.
anticipating the next humiliation, almost to
Yeah.
the extent that someone could compliment you and you lash out at them, assuming it was an insult, and the person would have to
Right.
say no. And this thing actually happens online all the time. People
All
don't
the time.
realize their online interactions are also based on the fight or flight mechanism.
Right.
And sometimes, like, a person will, after screening a bunch of insults and battling with a bunch of randos on the internet, then someone actually compliments you, and you're in such a traumatized state, you'll say something aggressive towards them, and they'll
Sarcastic
say,
or
"Hey, hold on,
aggressive.
I was trying to
Mhm.
compliment you, actually."
Right. Yeah.
You'll have to
Yeah.
say, "Oh, wait a
Yeah.
second, sorry, I didn't realize that. I was so stuck in this state of defending myself against the next humiliation
Right.
that I wasn't ready to receive a compliment."
Right. Yeah. But I think that you make such a good point because there's so many different layers and levels to how it is that we got to where we are. And I think that a big part of it is that we really need to start talking about what that looks like. Because it's almost like now we're all in this big web, and the web is called mental health. And there's so many things stuck in the web. And it's like we can't see what's in that side of the web and what's in that side of the web. And a part of it is that as individuals, if we could get ourselves back to what actually means the most to us and what has always intrinsically been our own truth. It's in here. It's just really programmed and hidden over different traumas and different hurts and different perceptions of ourselves based on our environments or based on our upbringings, whatever those are. And yet it's like, we really were taught how to forfeit our own truth along the way for the sake of programming, right? Like if you think about it, your parents are like, do this. You're like, no. I always give the example of like when you're a little child, right? And everybody's got like a creepy Uncle Tom or a creepy Aunt Susie, like everyone's got someone in their family that like as a kid you're like, stay away from that one, like the energy does not feel right there. And it's one of those things, as a child, our instincts, that just our true source self is automatically going to hide behind mommy or daddy's leg, No, that's our no. We don't want to go see creepy Uncle Tom or Auntie Susie. We just want to
I
stay
can't.
right here because
I
we feel
honestly,
safe here.
I never thought of any of my aunts or uncles exactly as creepy, exactly. Although maybe
Not for
one
like,
uncle by marriage is creepy, come to think
yeah,
about it.
I
But
just mean like there's one family member in at least one in all of our families that we're like,
maybe
that
by
was a little
marriage.
loose. Yeah, yeah, that was got a little loose screws or whatever it is. It's just a piece of the human journey. But think about this from a perspective as a little kid, that's our way of creating a boundary. We stay behind the parent's leg, right? And but it back then, especially, and it still happens sometimes now, but it's like the parent takes the kid and like pushes it over to the aunt or the uncle and says, come on, don't be rude, go say hi. We have to remember that we've been forfeiting our truth for the sake of our conditioning for so long, and that a really big part of the conscious awareness that we're coming into right now is that we have hurt ourselves forfeiting our truth. We have hurt ourselves learning all these defense mechanisms and how to block the truth of things that matter to us for the sake of, it wasn't safe to do, or we might get in trouble if we speak our truth, or whatever the outcomes and fears that we've gained along the way through our conditioning are. But people aren't looking at, right, it's because I was conditioned, and that there's actually a way for me to undo that and unlearn that so I can actually function as a regular, strong, independent, loving, capable person in the world. Because the whole narrative has been about, just stay stuck in your trauma. It's okay not to be okay. You don't have to put in the work to take accountability for your mindset, your emotions, the energy that you throw around. You're
But you know,
just
it's
People
interesting,
have to kowtow to you instead. Sorry.
like the concept of work. That there is certain sort of inner work. I'm a big fan of the sort of mystic philosopher teacher named G.I. Gurdjieff, and he always talks about the work
Okay.
and the inner work. So I do believe in a concept of inner work, and I love being a musician. To me, practicing an instrument is a form of inner work that you commit to, or any art form. I strongly recommend to everybody participate in an art form, find an instrument to practice. Chess is another instrument of self-reflection. I play tons of chess. I'm a chess teacher as well as a musician. Um, the visual arts, any number of art forms are just a great way to reflect, to find time with yourself. But I just wanted to say, on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have the work on the other hand, but sometimes there's also, like my aunt said, there's healing, and then there's sometimes something that's even more convenient, more effective sometimes, is not dealing. You don't need to take on everything. Sometimes people turn it
Yeah.
into this arduous task from the outset. It's this arduous thing that they're perceiving. And there is that interval. There are those situations where it's appropriate to let go.
Right.
I'm not the best at letting go in life in a lot of different cases, but I've come to appreciate the art of letting go, especially even in the wake of, like you said, of the past 5 years, and how many
Yeah.
relationships and things like that have changed. Different
Yeah.
times, different seasons, different friends for different seasons. There's times where, a good concept in terms of relating to other people that I was introduced to by an aunt of mine is the concept of, for example, when you have a friend or somebody who you've come into conflict with, a friend, or a relationship isn't the same as it used to be. A lot of the time, it's like this crash and burn sort of mentality. Like if someone's not your friend, well, now they have to be your enemy, or it has to
Right,
reach this boiling resolution point of one form or another. Either it's going to be a falling out or a glorious reconciliation, but in some cases, there's this third party option, which is the reality of putting people on the back burner at different
right,
points in life. You know, it
right.
doesn't mean they're not your friend. It doesn't mean that you have to hate them, but sometimes, the conversation isn't going the way it's supposed to be. And hey, don't pursue further conflict. Don't necessarily feel the need to resolve it if it's not a marriage, if it's not a business partnership where your decisions affect each other's finances. A lot of the time, the best option is put it on the back burner,
And
you
let it
know?
be. I think that this is one of the things is that, if you look at even over the last 5 years, I've really witnessed this in society. They're hijacking the social, or sorry, they're hijacking the self-development. They've brought in this new age thing. So, and don't get me wrong, okay? We need to pay attention to consciousness. I do believe that our consciousness has shifted. I listen to and watch people all the time being like, whoa, I'm having all these crazy experiences, all these synchronicities. Like we're on, I'll say, the in the mind a little bit more. It's activated in a different way. But I think that the self-help industry itself has really been hijacked. It's one of these things that's like it wants you to just keep on looking at where have you been hurt? Where have you been hurt? I'm a humongous believer, and I always have been. If we're gonna look at where we're hurt, the opposite side is equally important. What strengths have we learned through the hurt? Where's the wisdom that was gained? Because we're only looking at the hurt, which is then deteriorating what the concept or perception of our own strength. And so this one's all of a sudden going down, down, down. And then we're like, why do we have a mental health epidemic? But a part of it is, hand in hand, just like if I'm doing street drugs for 25 years in my life, my brain ain't going to be working the same way. I don't understand how people don't get that medication does the same thing. It's a drug. Like, if we are going to help each other as a humanity, we have to start educating about what other options. Like, if you need to do that drug to get yourself to a point of feeling like you're capable of actually knowing how to work with and for yourself, I've got nothing to say about that. I mean, everybody's own free will. Do you? Um,
Mhm.
but I think that it is harmful. It is misleading. We're walking backwards when it comes to looking at how we function as a human, how it is that we can actually unlearn the traumas that we have experienced, or at least go through different aspects of healing. Like you said, I mean, I'm huge on the healing aspect from the perspective that it saved my life. It saved my life at various points along my journey here. I mean, self exploration has been I'm in love with it. I'm fascinated by the human. I think we're so awesome, and I think it's so interesting that we have so much to offer, and yet with the perceptions that the narratives that we've built into or bought into, we're minimizing our strength, we're minimizing our capabilities. And if we go through, I think about the MAID program here in Canada. It's the medical assisted suicide program, and the fact that they're offering it to people with mental health issues now. I mean, this whole thing drives me crazy, and it's a whole conversation for a different time because there's so many things to talk about with it. But I know a lot of clients along the way that have been in extremely difficult phases of their life, and that phase might have been a month, that phase might have been a year, that phase might have been 5, but they were stuck. It was one thing after another that was just going horrible in their life. And in those moments, had they had made as an option, they would have taken it, because in those moments they were stuck. But as they were working with other people that were helping them see things in a new perspective and learn more about themselves, really get to know themselves, not who they think they are because everyone else told them that that's who they are, but really get to know themselves, it becomes that piece that that person, those people would have never had the opportunity to do that if they would have been offered made, which is a big part of the reason that my whole entire spirit's on fire with the way that they are doing AKA treatment, because it's not treatment. It is sick care. It is hurting people. Our humanity is not in a better state of being by the way that we're approaching this medical model to mental health. And I'm a huge believer that we need to be integrating Eastern and Western medicine. I'm not saying I'm a primary care doctor that can tell you what's going on in your body. But I can say that as a practitioner in Eastern medicine, I can listen to your body and help it work stuff out and release things and remind you how to train your brain and do some really cool things that activate different parts in the system to let your pain go when it comes up so you can manage it. Like there's just so many different levels, layers, and aspects that we're ignoring for the sake of it's okay to be okay, to validate a narrative that, yeah, we're a human. You're not gonna be okay sometimes, man. Like, you have to go through shit in order to find strength. And I don't know why that is like that, but if we're just staying in the I'm not okay, we're missing the aspect of learning what is okay about ourselves. And they go hand in hand. One doesn't exist without the other. Even if we're not paying attention to what's great about ourselves, it still exists.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the question is too, just the basic question I have to consider is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If
Right.
the person they're going through something, is it a psychological state and then they have a safe place to reside and to process this, or are they going back into a dangerous environment where they're not going to be able to process things in a healthy manner and so-called move forward because their circumstances continue to be dangerous or not
Totally.
healthy or
Yeah.
what have you. Um, yeah, I mean, I wish there was just a better network of care that we had for each other. And it's interesting, like with all this sort of New World Order stuff we've been subjected to, a lot of people have produced the knee-jerk reaction that we're being subjected to some sort of global communist agenda sort of thing. And I don't think that this has anything to do with so-called historic communism, unless you want to say the authoritarian aspect of it is just
Right.
what's communist, or that it's communistic to force people to act in a uniform manner. But these people, for the most part, the globalists, if you will, the COVID agenda people, they're not citing Karl Marx. They're not even citing
Right.
rhetoric that even resembles traditional Marxist rhetoric. Marxists
Mm.
traditionally cited Marx all the time. They said, we think Marx is this brilliant economist and philosopher, and that we should organize society based on his ideas.
Right.
Ho Chi Minh said that. Lenin said that. Mao Zedong said that. Even Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana said that. He was a very influential philosopher and economist. Nowadays, you have these people; they're not expressing Marxism in any way, and it just it leads me to something that's been on my mind, which is I would really like to challenge people to really think towards a new paradigm and a new possibility that takes all of the positive and negative aspects of what we've experienced up until this point to just make a better society for all, for the
For
well-being of the
humanity.
human
Yeah.
race.
Yeah.
Because let's take a look at, what are the positives and negatives of capitalism? What are the positives and negatives of so-called communism? Is it communistic to have a public hospital? Some people think so. They're radical capitalists to that extent. They say, no, if you get sick, that's your problem. I don't want to pay one penny for you
Right.
getting well. Should we have public schools, or is that so-called communism to send our kids to
Right.
school to learn together? We're social beings. We're not meant to be in isolation. That's clear. We support each other. And truthfully, in the actual design of the human being, no person, even if they're the most brilliant person in the world, can create and design and do everything for themselves. Like,
Right.
wow, I'd love to see the perfectly, maybe some in isolation, there's some hermit who's living in a totally self-sufficient way. But if you want electricity, you're going to need an electrician, you know.
Right.
If you're an electrician, well, I hope you're also a farmer. I hope you can farm your own food and make your own food. You know, are you a mechanic? Are you a you know, an educator? If you have children, can you educate your children in literacy and in mathematics? And there's all these different things that ultimately we will rely on each other. Like me, I'm an electric bass player. I cannot fix electric basses. I certainly don't know how to make guitar amplifiers. I don't know how to make cables. You know, there's just a whole
Right.
science in just making a good instrument cable to
Right.
connect your instrument to an amplifier. I just play the instrument and I'm
Right.
relying on amp makers, guitar makers. I used to have a friend actually died tragically young, brilliant guitar player who like I think he died at the age of 26. It was so sad because he was in New York and just phenomenal musician and had this dream of moving to California and moved to California and got hit by a car and died. It seems like within a month or something.
Oh
Just
my
moved
God,
to
I'm so sorry
California
to
and
hear
died.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just but you know, he was you know, for a young guy, he's not just a good player, he's a really sophisticated player. And I remember him always saying, I kind of got to end on this note because I have to
Right.
take care of some chores and pick up my kids from school.
Yep.
But this friend, he was always sort of dismissive of musicians. He's like, oh, you know, there's a million people who just play a million notes, and you know, there's a bunch of just great musicians just playing a lot of licks and playing a lot of stuff. He's like, I admire the people who make these beautiful instruments.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's the
Seriously.
person that I admire.
Right.
So, you know,
That
we're all
understands all the science of it. Yeah.
so it's like I want it all. I want a society that allows me to be myself, that allows me to conduct business, that allows me to create and to write and to innovate and to be a unique individual and to share my vision with the world. I also want a society that looks out for all of its citizens, that
Right.
doesn't let people just rot away on the streets, that doesn't let people live in isolation, that doesn't let people remain alone when they've
Right.
lost their family members and would need some social support to make it to the next phase, the next chapter. So I think
Right.
we can have all of those things. I don't think it has to be a one or the other type of thing that either you lose your identity to communism or you become this ruthless, self-obsessed individual who just says gain wealth, forgetting all but self, like a
Right.
robot.
Yeah.
Um, I think we
Yeah.
can have it all. I think we can be individuals, and I think we can care for each other at the same time.
And just to that's a beautiful way to end this, and just to throw a compliment onto that is that I think that that's what we have really been reminded of throughout this whole COVID thing is that we need to get back to grassroots and coming together as a humanity because we just recognized, whoa, okay, so in our own rat race, when we're really busy, lots of stuff is going on that we're not paying attention to. And now that our eyes are wide open, we better come together as people to help and protect each other, to work with each other, to teach each other, to learn from each other as well. So, yeah, I do think that we're definitely heading in that direction. And I'm so excited to be alive for this part. So it's amazing. And thank you so much for, the universe connecting the dots and you being a part of the journey at this point in time. I truly, truly appreciate that.
Well, thank you. It was a good time talking with you, and I'll look forward to more conversations.
Yeah, yeah, for
Have
sure.
a, have a great day up there in Canada.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's snowing really nice right now, so I'm gonna stay
Oh,
inside and be nice and warm. But you have an awesome day in New York, and we'll chat soon.
okay. Talk to you
Okay.
soon. Thank you.
All right. Later.
Bye.